So I decided to start the video before the meat was totally done because I wanted to, I don't know what I got on me. I wanted to tell you guys something about butter. So a lot of times I hear people ask questions like, what is burned butter or what is brown butter? So basically what that means, and we do this with our popcorn, is that, I think when I held the onion against me, it had that onion gunk on it. Anyway, burned butter, brown butter. So basically what burned and brown butter is when you remove the water, the excess water from butter. So the way that you do that is you put butter in a pan. I usually keep mine on high, but if you keep it on high, you have to watch it. So then what you do is you boil it basically, and it'll start to, as it melts, it'll start to look like boiling water. It'll have water bubbles. And you'll totally, even though it may not make sense hearing it, you'll be able to see the difference in the butter. So basically what you'll start off with is boiling looking. It'll look like boiling water, and it'll be very loud. Sorry, let me turn that off. It'll be extremely loud. You'll hear the popping and the sizzling and the boiling of the butter. But as the water evaporates, it'll turn. You'll see it start to turn. First of all, it'll get quieter. And second of all, the bubbles will go from looking like boiling water bubbles to soap bubbles. Then all of a sudden it'll be like suds. And that's when you know that your butter is browned or burned. Now it's not actually burned, obviously, but it enhances the flavor of the butter. It's concentrated butter because you're taking the water out of it. Next time I make popcorn, I'll show you how I burn or brown my butter. But basically, it'll go from a boiling water looking to a sudsy, soapy looking. And once it's got that sudsy soap and it starts to rise in the pan, that's when you know you've gotten all the water out and you can turn it off. And brown butter and burned butter is good for a lot of things. It's good for popcorn. It's good for cooking with. It's basically a concentrated form of butter. So you get the concentrated butter flavor, and you're just removing the water is basically all you're doing. These are the last two pieces of meat that I'm searing now. So if you look in the pan now, you can see these sudsy soap bubbles. That's brown butter. That's burned butter. That's what it should look like when you're done. And obviously it looks like there's bubbles now because I'm cooking meat in it. So the water from the meat is causing those bigger bubbles. But when you brown or burn your butter, what you're going to see is very small sudsy bubbles. So when you hear a recipe refer to browning the butter or burning the butter, that's what they're referring to. They're basically referring to removing the water. Let me see if we have any carrots. I don't know if we do. No, it looks like we're out of carrots this time. But I did forget to cut my mushrooms, so I'll do that really fast. Let's see. And again, mushrooms are an optional in the short ribs. You don't have to use mushrooms. I just happen to love mushrooms, so I will saute some mushrooms because I really enjoy mushrooms. So once we remove all the meat, then we're gonna get the onions and the garlic cooking, and then the mushrooms. Then we'll put it all in the pot. Remember, add in a can of diced tomatoes with the juice. You can add in a little ground mustard. And most of the flavoring will come from the seasoning that we already put on the meat. So you don't need to add a lot of seasoning to it. In fact, I probably should have put the ground mustard in with the flour on the meat, but I didn't. So I'll add it in at the end, which is no big deal. So we're going to get these mushrooms cut up. And the reason why you want to saute your vegetables beforehand when you're doing something like braising is because it's very difficult to cook them and get rid of the bitterness of the onions when you're using the braising technique. They get wet, but they don't, and they may cook, but they don't really get that caramelization and that flavor that you want. So this is what your meat should look like when you're searing it. It has a nice crust on it. That's what you want. You want it to have a nice brown crust on it. So now we're going to move this cutting board out of the way because we're done with it. And we're going to bring the platter over for the meat. Now we're going to remove these from the butter oil mixture. We got all our meat, and we're going to add in our onions and garlic and cook that up. And then we got our mushrooms right here. So once we get this cooked up, we will then take those out. Actually, probably could do our mushrooms at the same time we're doing our onions and garlic. Let's do that. We don't want to overcrowd the pan, but it's okay. We just want to cook these down a little bit. Basically, again, you're taking the, when you saute or brown your onions, you're taking the water out of it. You're drying it out. So we're going to cook those up. We're going to get some herbs because I want to add some herbs to this. We've already added in the spices, but now we want some herbs. So I think I'm looking for thyme and a little oregano. So here's some oregano and here's some thyme. We're going to add this into the vegetables. We could also, let's wait and add that in once we put the liquid in because that would be tasty. Sorry, my hand itches. We're going to grab our Better Than Bouillon, which I love this stuff. Better Than Bouillon is awesome. I don't know if you guys use Better Than Bouillon, but Better Than Bouillon rocks. Here's our Better Than Bouillon. This is the roasted beef base. Love the roasted beef. That's how I make my broth. So what I'm going to do is fill a bowl with hot water. And then I'm going to add in a couple tablespoons of this Better Than Bouillon stuff. Hang on one second, I'm just filling the bowl with hot water. Well, I'm waiting for the water to get hot. Don't forget to salt and pepper your meat before you put the seasoned flour on it because you really want that salt to seep into your meat. Salt is an essential seasoning for any kind of meat, and especially potatoes. Potatoes taste horrible without salt. At least I think they do. They taste very bland. Salt is an incredibly important seasoning. I know a lot of people try to steer clear of salt, but actually you need sodium. So salt is a good thing to have as long as you have it in moderation. You can't just, have tons and tons and tons of salt. But if you have, moderate levels of salt, then that's okay. All right, here's our bowl of hot water that we're going to use to cover our meat and vegetables. Here's the Better Than Bouillon. We're going to grab a big spoon here and take a nice big scoop out of there and mix that in with our water. I also have bouillon cubes in the house, so should I ever need them, I have them. But I prefer, I think my biggest complaint with bouillon is trying to get the darn paper off. I'm going to invent a bouillon cube that has disintegratable paper on it. So you just throw it in your soup and the paper just disintegrates. That would be awesome. I hate trying to peel all the little ridges of paper off the bouillon cubes, It drives me nuts. Now we're going to add a little bit of mustard to our broth here. Again, just a squirt. Let's see. Let's stir this up. And this is what we'll use. We might need to add more water to cover the meat and vegetables, but this will be our base. It's nice and flavorful. It's got our broth in it. So this is what our water has turned into. It's turned into a nice beef broth. And then here's our mushrooms and onions and garlic cooking up. We're flinging onions. Oops, sorry, you guys fogged up there. Sorry about that. Here, let me... There we go. Sorry about that. I didn't realize you guys were fogging. But basically, I was just stirring up the mushrooms and onions. And again, you can skip whatever parts of this you don't like. If you don't like mushrooms, don't add mushrooms. If you don't like onions, don't add onions. You know, if you don't like garlic, don't add garlic. You could do this without any vegetables at all. I prefer to use mushrooms and onions, but you could do it without any vegetables at all. So now we're getting close to having the mushrooms and onions cooked. So we're going to start adding our meat back in. And start kind of positioning it all around the pan. Might need a bigger pan. I don't know. We're going to see if we can fit it all in here. I might need to use my cast iron, my giant cast iron, to fit everything. Let's see. Might fit. Let's see. No, it'll fit. Just barely. Let's see if we can get the potatoes in there. All right, here's our baggie of fingerling potatoes. We're gonna cut that open and pour our potatoes in here in the pot. All right, there we go. Gonna get that all positioned around. That looks good. All right. So now, as you can see, we got a pretty full pot there, but it's going to work. Now we're going to take our broth and our spoon. We're going to stir it up again, make sure nothing's settled on the bottom, none of the seasoning or flavoring that we want. It's going to settle on the bottom. Then we're going to grab a measuring cup here so I can ladle it. And we'll just pour this over our meat and vegetables. Yeah, we're not going to need all of this broth. I thought we'd need a little more, but we're not going to, definitely. All right. So I think we actually are going to use a bigger pot. I think this one's going to be a little challenging. Because it's so full, I feel like it's going to boil over. So we're going to get our trusty handy dandy turkey pan. When in doubt, use the turkey pan. So we're going to grab this here. Let's see. I'm going to grab this pot here and we're going to pour it all into our turkey pan. All right. There we go. Let me get my spoon. Yeah, I don't have the greatest perception. So sometimes I'll use 2 and 3 pans trying to figure out which one is the best one to use. Just because my perception is off. We're going to get all these mushrooms and onions out of here and into the turkey pan. My perception is not good since I had my stroke in 2018 and then I had another one in 2021. So things like being able to perceive how much will fit in one pan is a little bit of a challenge for me. So yeah, it can be a little difficult. So sometimes I go through a few pans trying to figure out which is the best one to use. But I always want to make sure that... All right, let me show you what we got here. Now that we got this, let me close the door over here. All right, this is a good size pan. You can see that it's nice and we're gonna make sure all the meat is under the liquid. The potatoes are under the liquid. It's just barely covered. Now we're gonna add our can of tomatoes and into the oven it goes to cook for 4 or 5 hours. It'll start smelling good in the first couple hours. That doesn't mean it's done, and you want to let it cook even longer, okay? Because you really want that meat to... Here's our can of tomatoes. So we're going to add this in just to give it a little zip. A little acid from the tomatoes. And we're going to leave the juice in the tomatoes. We're just going to throw the whole can in there. Well, obviously not the whole can, but, you know, everything inside the can. So here's our... We're just going to dump that in there with the juice. Then we're going to give it a stir. And we're going to add a little bit of red wine. I like Cabernet Sauvignon. That's generally what we use, although not always. I've already put the red wine in there, so we're good. Now we're just going to cover this with foil and put it in the oven and let it cook. The reason I did 2 pieces is because one piece doesn't cover the pan well. So what I'll do is I'll take 2 pieces and then I put them together like this. And then I'll put a couple little folds. I'll fold it over a couple times to seal the 2 pieces of foil together. See? I'll show you. Hold on. I usually do 3 or 4 folds. And now we have one sealed piece of foil. So we'll put this over the pot here. And we don't want to poke holes in our foil because, like a pressure cooker, it's the pressure of the steam that's going to cause the meat to get tender. So we want to keep that, that foil nice and sealed. And now we'll take our whole pan of food. And this will feed us because it's just me and Angie for a few days. Caitlin went out for a few days. So since it's just us, this will feed us through the whole weekend. We'll do a couple days where we'll eat the potatoes. And then the second couple days we'll do mashed potatoes. And finish eating it over the mashed potatoes. So... you can definitely, for a smaller crew, like just 2 of you, you can definitely make a meal like this and have it last you for 3 or 4 days. Now, later on, I'll get the dishes done. Right now, I have to go get the sheets stripped so I can put the laundry in. A mushroom piece. So good. Alrighty, so that's what we're making for dinner. The other thing about short ribs is that short ribs tend to be a more inexpensive cut of meat. You can usually get a couple of short ribs for maybe $5, you know, 3 or 4 short ribs. They're usually not terribly expensive, and that makes it a more doable dinner. The only thing about short ribs is because of the amount of fat in them, you really do need to let them cook for a while. You know, there is no real short ribs recipe that does short ribs in, like, you know, by searing them in a pan. It's not like a steak. So you absolutely want to do your short ribs over a long period of time. Short ribs are very tough. They have a lot of connective tissue and they have a lot of fat. So you really want to render that fat out. And the best way to do that is with a long cooking period. The other thing that you can do is on day 2, because we said you could eat these over a couple of days. On day 2, what you can do is when you take it out of the fridge, it's going to be cold, and you can actually scoop the fat off the top if you don't want the fat to break down and be in the dish on the second day. You can also ladle the fat off on the first, the first day when you, sorry, I'm cleaning my bottle. When you pull it out of the oven, you can sit and ladle the fat off. I know that to be healthy, we do need some level of fat. I know that we don't want a ton of fat, but we do need some fat in our diet. So I tend, because not everything I cook has fat in it, I tend to just leave the fat alone and just mix it in. Fat is important for your brain growth, for your brain health. Certain fats. It depends on how much fat there is, but usually from short ribs, there's not like an excessive amount of fat. Not that I've seen anyway. I guess it depends on how fatty your short ribs are. But you could ladle some fat off the top after you take it out of the oven if you wanted to. It's important to have a balanced diet, even with fat. It's just important not to make your diet primarily fat. But you do want to have some fat in your diet. So, that's my thinking. I haven't washed my bottle for a few weeks, so get that clean. I only use it for water, so I don't have to wash it every day, but every couple weeks it gets a little filmy and you got to wash it. And then one of the things I love about Circle, and I don't get, I don't get promotions or any kind of deals or any freebies to promote Circle. I just happen to like it. Is that the flavoring is, every time you pull out a flavoring thing, it's this whole piece that comes out of the box. So you get a brand new mouthpiece every single time you change your, it's called a sip. Every time you change your sip, you get a brand new mouthpiece. So you don't have little grooves in a mouthpiece to make sure are clean. So the only thing you really have to clean is the bottle and then the lid that the mouthpiece fits into, because I go through a sip about every other day. And so every time I open up a new sip, I get a brand new mouthpiece. So you don't have to worry about all the little grooves that a lot of water bottles have in mouthpieces. And that's a good thing, because those grooves can be a pain in the butt to really get in there and clean well. So I'm going to put my bottle back in the sleeve. Keeps it cold. So yeah, you can also serve these short ribs with bread. You can make homemade bread. I don't know if you guys make homemade bread. I love homemade bread. So I might make some bread later this afternoon to go with the short ribs. Like I said, you can add the potatoes into your short ribs, or you can make mashed potatoes. You can serve it over rice. You could serve it over egg noodles, or you could just eat it without any carbs if that's your deal. Totally fine, and either way. And the short ribs will make a good dinner for a large family, and it'll make multiple dinners for a smaller family. So definitely a good meal. I hope you enjoyed this cooking tutorial, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Have a great night, guys, or great day. Sorry, it's daytime now. Bye.